So I'm sure all of you are very eager to not watch this Young Turks video concerning Trump supporting Nancy Pelosi. But I assure you, I'm not going to make you watch the whole thing. I would like to remind you, please subscribe to me on Gab and join Gab if you're not. Join Gab, get on Gab, because it is really a good place to grow. Gab and Minds, but Minds is I think Minds is a little more difficult, if you don't mind me saying, but they're both good. Anyway, so a lot of funny shit going on with respect to the new Democratic House majority that will be coming in less than a month and a half. But you know what I've been saying and what a lot of people have been saying, a lot of people from all over the spectrum, is that the Democrats don't know what they've won. Essentially, what happened was this, okay? In a number of very, very Democratic districts in Boston, New York, Detroit, Minnesota, you could probably say in, those would probably be enough for this example. In those areas, veteran, very well-known Democrats were ousted in favor of much more progressive people. Not necessarily a bad thing in the long term if you're talking about what's going to happen with the Democratic Party. You know, these older Democrats they're not going to they're not going to last forever. Now, in Minnesota, for example, it was a smooth and painless transition as far as the Democrats were concerned between asshole, liar, Keith Ellison, and Ilhan Omar, who is basically like Keith Ellison, except much younger and Somalian and a woman. So that was a very smooth transition. In Boston, you had Ayanna Pressley. There's not going to be much friction out of that one, because essentially Ayanna Pressley does not add anything in terms of policy that her predecessor, I think his name was Capuano. It's not like they had like a distinct difference between them. And honestly, I think Presley is skilled enough to succeed in politics. You know, I don't think that I don't agree with anything she believes in. I'm just saying she'd be good at the job of being a corrupt Democratic politician. So good for her. And, obviously I don't begrudge anything of her. I don't think that she doesn't deserve to be in Congress. And I don't think any of these people don't deserve to be in Congress. There's Ocasio-Cortez, which we'll talk about soon, and also Rashida Tlaib. She is going to cause a lot of headaches for the Democratic caucus. Now, she was not a smooth transition, because you're going from John Conyers, who, yes, was a far left figure in the Democratic Party, but very old and kind of part of the old left, part of the 60s left. And he was also a serial sexual harasser. So it had happened at some point, and the man was, I think, near 90 years old. And he's still in Congress, and he's super corrupt. So they elect in his place that he wanted I think it was his son or his grandson elected in his place, Conyers. But they ended up electing what's her name, Rashida Tlaib, because there was another candidate who I think was Conyers' nephew, who's also a local politician, and they both split the Conyers vote. And instead, they got the Palestinian American Rashida Tlaib, who is going to cause a lot of headaches for the Democrats in terms of their donor community. I do not agree with almost anything Rashida Tlaib says, but I think that she's good at what she does in terms of being able to present her case. That being said, I don't think that she's going to be good for the Democrats going into the next election. It's gonna be kind of weird. I don't know what's gonna happen. Maybe who knows? Maybe it would be a good thing to have somebody like her. So those are all the radical candidates that ousted very established, safe seat Democrats during the election, or replaced ones that were compelled to retire, or in Ellison's case, he ran for Attorney General of Minnesota. So what exactly is the problem with that? because you might be asking, okay, so they replaced some people, and obviously these people do have some popular support. What exactly is the issue with that? So, in terms of people who actually have executive power, the progressives gained literally nothing. All of their progressive gubernatorial and senatorial candidates, I believe, were kind of a flop, unless you count Kristen Sinema, who really had to moderate her message in order to win, and many would say she was being a pernicious liar during the campaign. That I guess depending on who you ask. So you had Stacey Abrams lost. Those people that complain that she lost because look, any way you slice it, she lost the popular vote. Okay, the issue she was running on after the election, was the idea that I think that there could be enough votes out there to force the election into a runoff by bringing Brian Kemp under 50%. That was the whole premise. It wasn't that she was going to win the election. It was that she would cause enough of a change in the ratio that they would have been forced into a runoff. Well, okay. Apparently, the law said otherwise. The courts said otherwise. The electoral rules said otherwise. Your bullshit campaign talking about everything being about race and everything being about diversity, that says otherwise. Look, I think that it's great that more people voted in Georgia, especially people from minority communities. Um, the fact that they voted for somebody who is such a transparent race baiter as her, I don't think it bodes well for Georgia's future. I think she could end up being a very powerful candidate for senator in the future. Kemp, I think, is his tenure is going to be tainted by accusations of racism, and it's very unfortunate. Same thing with Florida, with the DeSantis versus Gillum race. Gillum obviously lost. There's no way that you could tens of thousands of votes of difference, and Gillum thought that he would actually close that by basically telling people, oh, you can come in and sign your name to the ballot that you already submitted. Get the fuck out of here. And then, of course, there's Bill Nelson, who we'll get to soon. So anyway, I know this is a long introduction, but here is Chunk Yogurt talking about the, his Buffalo goddess, Nancy Pelosi, and Donald Trump basically, baiting them. This is what's good. This is the real baseball going on here. People are already talking about this. I'm a little late to the game because I was kind of busy today. But here we go.
The election's over. The Democrats win the House, and they're going to pick up about 34 seats overall.
Always remember to downvote on any TYT video, unless sometimes Jippy Dore says something good, and the other guy, the Humanist Report, is I guess credible.
And Donald Trump does something weird, which is, I suppose, fairly normal for him. But he tweets out, in all fairness, Nancy Pelosi deserves to be chosen Speaker of the House by the Democrats. If they give her a hard time, perhaps we will add some Republican votes. She has earned this great honor. Now, does he mean that? Of course not. So why is he backing Nancy Pelosi?
Of course not.
Who he just fought against and criticized throughout the entire elections and said the whole party is going to be like Nancy Pelosi and she's the worst. Why does he turn around right afterwards and say, oh yeah, she should be Speaker of the House? Because he thinks she's weak and it'll be really easy to beat her. It's like, look at how weak she was, in the elections. Look at how weak the whole entire Democratic leadership was. They couldn't even pick up the Senate when I'm deeply unpopular, right? So, and what does Pelosi do?
So he leaves out the fact, not only did they not pick up the Senate, they lost seats in the Senate. They've lost, I think, a total of 3 seats now. Might be even, well, it's a net total of 2 right now. So it could go up to 3, depending what happens in Mississippi. And they were very close to ending up with a 4-seat net loss because of Arizona. So that would have been absolute. I mean, everybody is basically ignoring what's happened with Chuck Schumer now. He's Mr. Irrelevant. Nobody's gonna. I mean, for the next, barring some sort of really problematic issue with the House, with the Senate Republican caucus, Mitt Romney's in there. Chuck Schumer might become the most irrelevant politician in the world for the next 2 years at least, if not longer.
Do right afterwards? Well, confirms Donald Trump's suspicions. Quoting from the Hill here, Pelosi, who's expected to become the next speaker, promised after Tuesday's victory that she would offer, quote, a bipartisan marketplace of ideas, saying that American people want results and have had enough of division. Incorrect. You were supposed to be the resistance. No, your voters do not want you to unite with Donald Trump. That's a preposterous thing to say. I know the base. I would argue I know the base almost better than anybody because of the deep connection we have with them online. We're not on TV. We're online. I mean, we're also on some TV stations, bless their hearts. But we get all this feedback. We get a tremendous amount of feedback. I don't know anyone in the base who says, oh, golly gee, if only the Democrats would work with Trump more to do bipartisan compromise on some of his goals. Nobody thinks that. No one in the Democratic base believes that. But somehow Democratic leadership thinks that's a great idea. Gee, I wonder why.
Okay, is Chunk really wrong here? Is Buffalo Yogurt really wrong here? I don't think he's wrong because, look, this is really the problem with the Democratic Party, and I think Uyghur is aware, but it's not like he has a choice. Cenk Uyghur and the Young Turks and the progressive base, whether it's Indivisible or whether it's real progressive groups, the Bernie Bros and things like that. They did their hardest. They tried really hard for a long time to change the Democratic Party, and they've gotten some results, but not really where they want to be, which is obviously disappointing for them. New York State and California are obvious areas where you would wonder, well, those are the most progressive states. How come progressives have failed? How come they failed to unseat what's his name? Not Jerry Brown. Gavin Newsom as the gubernatorial candidate. How come in a two-way general election between a progressive, Kevin De Leon, and an establishment progressive / liberal, Dianne Feinstein. Feinstein did end up winning, and this after she had possibly the worst 2 months of her political career, where the entire world was chasing after her due to her disgraceful role in the Kavanaugh hearings, when a lot of Republicans were talking about, well, we'll just vote for Kevin De Leon because obviously, I mean, why would we ever want Feinstein to keep representing the Democrats in the Senate, or representing California in the Senate, I should say. And then in New York State, they failed totally to unseat Andrew Cuomo. Okay, so the progressive side in the Democratic Party is really reeling right now. But what they have to understand, and what I think a lot of them do understand, even if they're not going to admit it on their programs, is that where were the actual gains for the Democratic Party in the House and in some of these statewide races? It wasn't necessarily progressives. It was a lot of these quote unquote centrist Democrats. Some of whom are actually CIA connected. I believe one of them in Michigan is a former Bush administration operative who is now a Democrat. There was another one in Virginia. We might actually have to go in depth into that at some point, because I think it's a troubling trend that you see more and more of these progressive Democrats, not progressive Democrats, these quote-unquote centrist Democrats are actually just neoconservatives who don't really have any economic principles. They're just for higher defense spending. They're for more foreign wars. They're for a bigger military-industrial complex and intelligence agency oversight into Americans' lives. That's not a productive and conducive reform to any party. Okay, I would say that actually shows that the Democratic Party is becoming more corrupt. So alongside Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib and all these people who, again, I don't agree with them. Tulsi Gabbard, I think she's a good congresswoman. I don't agree with a lot of her views. I agree with her on the wars, keeping us out of Syria. Those people are not the ones who are growing the Democratic Party in a lot of these suburban districts in Pennsylvania, Virginia, where, a lot of these other ones in New Jersey, for example. Those are uber-centrist Democrats who are showing up and saying, well, we're kind of going to make this party a little more like the Clintons. And by the way, the Clintons, they have one of their cabinet members from the 90s, Donna Shalala, just won a congressional seat. I was hoping she wouldn't win it because she's honestly hideously ugly, and I have no idea how people in Miami would vote for this disgusting crone who was corrupt at the University of Miami. She is not a good politician. I don't understand anybody who voted for this woman. And they decided to give her the seat over Elvira Salazar because Salazar might have in the past had less than hostile interactions with Fidel Castro when she was a TV reporter. Okay, when you're a TV reporter, I think it's a little less of a responsibility than being the corrupt head of it's a private university, but the University of Miami. So that's one cabinet official, and then you have Mike Espy, who's running for Senate in Mississippi, who could win that race, who was literally corrupt as agriculture secretary. He took bribes, never got convicted, took bribes from Tyson Chicken, who poured tons and tons of chicken shit into a river in Arkansas. Okay, so in my opinion, the Democratic Party is getting worse. The Republican Party is it's not getting worse. I think we don't even know if it's getting better. Okay, some of these Republicans getting elected are the same crap as always. Rick Scott just won in Florida. I mean, if you're pro-environment, is there anything good about Rick Scott? No. If you're wanting to remove Second Amendment restrictions, gun control bullshit, Rick Scott is bad. Okay? Bill Nelson is worse. Rick Scott is bad. So I can totally sympathize with what Cenk Uygur is going through right now. It's just I'm on the other side of the spectrum.
Donald Trump wants Nancy Pelosi to be the leader. Of course, that's why he wants her to be the leader. And he says, and he's got a threat for her too. So let's watch this video.
Look, we have a president that's willing to work across the aisle to get things done. We feel good about where we are in the Senate, but if Democrats take the House, they shouldn't waste time investigating. They should focus on what the people have put them there to do. There are a lot of things that the president would love to work with them on, and hopefully they'll come to the table and be willing to do that and not continue to be the party of resist and obstruct.
So that's Sarah Huckabee Sanders saying, hey, you better not investigate us. We'll work with you. No, come here. Yeah, it's not a trap. We'll work with you. Of course we will. We'll be reasonable. Donald Trump will be reasonable, but you better not investigate. And in fact, Trump himself doubled down in the press conference this morning. Watch.
That when the Democrats take over the chairmanship of all these important committees, you're going to get hit with a blizzard of subpoenas on everything from the Russia investigation to your cell phone use to your tax returns.
Ready? Then you're going to, if that happens, then we're going to do the same thing, and government comes to a halt. And I would blame them because they now are going to be coming up with policy. They're the majority in the House.
The real question is, you just sat up here and said that from this podium that are you offering an my way or highway scenario to the Democrats? You're saying that if they start investigating you, that you can play that game and investigate
better than them.
Can you compartmentalize that?
And I think I know more than they know.
Can you compartmentalize that and still continue to work with them for the benefit of the rest of the country?
No.
Or are all bets off?
No. If they do that, then it's just all it is a warlike posture.
And so then, wait a minute, then the follow-up.
You heard my answer. Go ahead.
Yeah. He's saying, you better do exactly as I tell you, and you better not investigate me, otherwise we're going to have a warlike posture.
I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration, both what Trump said and Cenk Uygur said. I think you're going to see a chess game here. You have to remember, guys, those of you that watch me, those of you that might be new, that I followed the Clinton presidency. I grew up with it, but a lot of it was very superficial nonsense. The whole thing with Lewinsky and the affairs, and nobody really knew what Whitewater was about. And it was only after years that I started reading about what really happened with Clinton that I really realized how he succeeded. And it was triangulation. And Cenk Uygur knows exactly what triangulation is, because what that was is, let's see here. Here we go. This is recommended reading for anybody that wants to know how Bill Clinton was a successful president. Whatever you feel about him personally, behind the Oval Office by Dick Morris, who was the pioneer of triangulation, was basically that's how he survived. That's how he got reelected. In 1994, he got destroyed in the midterms. Destroyed. Everybody wanted to talk about a blue wave this year. Even if the Democrats would not have lost the Senate seats, and even if they would have won more House seats, there's nothing comparing to 1994, the Republican Revolution, the contract with America. The Democrats lost 9 Senate seats, and I think they lost 63 seats in the House. It was the first time since the 30s that the Republican Party had a majority in both houses of Congress. And Dick Morris was brought in by Clinton after the election, basically to salvage his presidency. And what did he say? Well, all you have to do is hand the Republicans fresh meat all the time with policies that basically your party as an institution can swallow, and that the Republicans will like too. So what did they get? They got the welfare for work stuff. They got all this stuff, the Telecom Act. They got a lot of legislation that the Republicans had been hoping for years. For years, the Republicans had been hoping for and could not get through because they never had control of Congress, not under Reagan, not under Ford, not under Nixon, not even under Eisenhower, who was probably the most popular Republican president in the history of that party. They could never have dreamed of any of the things that Bill Clinton ended up handing to them. Excuse me. And it was a huge it was a huge success in terms of Bill Clinton personally, because he got reelected in 1996. Now with Trump, he doesn't even have to give as much. All he has to do is basically cajole the Democrats and get them to say, well, you know, you guys are in favor of drug legalization. If you're talking about marijuana, I would say I'm willing to give you that. I would say that I'm willing to give a lot of these DACA people a permanent path to citizenship. I would say I would be willing to. What's another one? The other big one is the criminal justice reform bill, which we discussed last night in my other video. And then you could probably say, well, in exchange for that, I want my fucking wall, and I want it, and you are going to give it to me. And he would probably be able to bully them in some way, shape, or form into giving him either the wall or something else, or to, you know, the Democrats are not in a good position. They have literally no power in the Senate. Okay? The Republicans under Clinton had some power in the Senate if they wanted to filibuster any of, it's not even a filibuster, they could just deny hearings to Bill Clinton's judicial nominees or whatever. So Clinton at the time probably had to come and negotiate with Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott, who was, you know, he's known nowadays for a racist remark he made in support of Strom Thurmond. But Bill Clinton and Trent Lott got along very well because Trent Lott was a horse trader and Bill Clinton was also a horse trader. They were birds of a feather. They were both Southern people. Trent Lott was more of a doctrinaire Christian conservative, and Bill Clinton was more of the Southern Democrat. So, you know, this face, this Cenk Uygur face is pretty much the face you're going to be seeing a lot.
And he knows he can push Democrats around. Now, in the bubble of Washington, Democrats and Nancy Pelosi believe, like, oh, we got this. Okay. When they asked her right before the election about, hey, you know, are you going to be Speaker of the House if you guys win, et cetera, she said, I know the territory and I'm really good at what I do. Based on what? If you're really good at what you do, why does Donald Trump want you to be Speaker of the House? And what have you accomplished? She talks about it like, oh man, we roll the Republicans all the time on appropriations bills. Really? I haven't seen that at all. I don't know any progressive voter who thinks you're killing the Republicans on legislative battles. Really? In Washington, they actually believe that. I've heard other people say that about Nancy Pelosi. That's an alternate reality. It does not exist. She said, oh, in the appropriations bill, oh, we rolled them and we got this and we got that, and then they were going to vote on DACA. Yeah, but Nancy, I got news for you. They didn't vote on DACA. You were totally wrong. As usual, you got played. I mean, it's not just her, Chuck Schumer. He gets played even worse on the Senate side. We got nothing on DACA. He fast-tracked Donald Trump's judicial appointments. And what did you get? You got nothing.
So that wasn't her. That was just Chuck Schumer who fast-tracked the judicial appointments. But he's right. Cenk Uygur is right here. This is not a debatable position, okay? Cenk Uygur and let's say if you took somebody on the right wing, if you took, for example, the Vince guy, Vince from the Red Elephants, who I think that they would both agree that the Democratic Party is failing in a lot of maybe not him. I don't know why I picked him, but you could say Tucker Carlson if you want somebody more mainstream, somebody like one of these Fox News people, Greg Gutfeld. They would all agree that this Democratic caucus in the House has been a failure in many ways. In some ways, I mean, there's small areas where they've succeeded. They were able to prevent the Republicans from revoking federal funding for Planned Parenthood. I was very pissed off about that. Defeating the House Democrats didn't do this, but the Senate was able to block the Republicans from repealing Obamacare at the root and replacing it with basically the the Graham Cassidy bill. So, that was more a function of John McCain defecting to the Democrats and thumbing down and whatever. But that had nothing to do with Nancy Pelosi. It had very little to do with Chuck Schumer, because in reality that was John McCain's personal vendetta against Donald Trump. So we'll go into some other issues that are going on right now. So Bill Nelson's ending. Sluggish campaign couldn't overcome Rick Scott's millions. This is the way they're going to be painting this for the rest of the next few years. So it says time finally caught up with Bill Nelson. They're going to make this all about how Rick Scott is rich and he was able to pay for his Senate seat or whatever. Well, Rick Scott is rich and Bill Nelson is rich. So you had two rich guys fighting and one of them won. And it happened to be Rick Scott. And I called this, if you look at, the two pictures, Rick Scott, Bill Nelson. See if we can get through this quick enough. So you have Skeletor versus Red Skull, basically, these two really old, weird guys running. And I don't really think that there was a good or bad candidate. I mean, I think Bill Nelson was bad, obviously. I don't think Rick Scott was good. So if I would have lived in Florida, I guess maybe I would have voted for Rick Scott. Maybe. It's the same as here in Ohio. It's the same nonsense. You get these fake people running as conservatives or as whatever, and in reality their conservatism doesn't really mean shit, and that's why I think we do need other parties. After 46 years in public office, he finally met his match in Governor Rick Scott, whose vast personal fortune, trademark aggressiveness, and single-minded discipline has proven to be just enough to produce an excruciatingly narrow victory, Scott's third close statewide win in 8 years. So they're not giving Scott the real credit because, Bill Nelson, I think, should probably, he had easy runs in the past, and in reality, what has he accomplished as the senator for Florida? Not much. The state is still kind of, the state of Florida still has pollution issues, okay? And I think that as a senator in Florida, I think that I would personally think that Floridians should probably vote Green Party more. And this will probably shock some of you, but all this algae nonsense and everything, you need somebody who's really going to tackle that aggressively. I don't think either of the main parties are going to do that. And you can kiss my ass if you think otherwise. When you're running against Rick Scott, you're always playing defense, said Democratic strategist Steve Shale. And our path to victory as Democrats is largely predicated on record turnout in a handful of counties. It's hard to get the win. When the final results of a manual recount are reported in Tallahassee today, Scott is expected to be the winner by less than 13,000 votes out of more than 8 million cast. Like it fucking means anything. Like anybody cares. A flurry of increasingly desperate and unsuccessful post-election lawsuits couldn't change the outcome. It will mark the first time since the direct election of U.S. senators began more than a century ago that both Florida senators will be Republicans, Scott and Marco Rubio, and it brings to a close one of the longest careers in the history of Florida politics and one of the last vestiges of the Democratic Party of a bygone era. The last of the moderates, former state chief financial officer Alex Sink said of Nelson. In a period of hyper-partisanship, Nelson bet that voters would gravitate toward the congressman who rose so far above the political fray he made it to space, the Democrat who affectionately calls his Republican counterpart Marco, the candidate who branded himself Florida's independent senator. What a joke. What a joke. You voted for Obamacare. Screw you. You're not an independent in any way if you voted for Obamacare. In any way, shape, or form. For the better part of the past 5 decades, that worked. This time it didn't. It's unfortunate, Sink said, but it just feels like his brand of politics is going away. I say good riddance. At the outset, Nelson seemed to have plenty going for him, including a string of 5 straight statewide victories, 2 as state insurance commissioner. He was running in President Donald Trump's first midterm, usually a time of trouble for presidents. Nor was the summer kind to Scott as a series of environmental and management crises rocked the state. Guacamole green algae covered Lake Okeechobee. See what I'm talking about? Red tide scared away thousands of visitors and brought protesters to Scott's campaign tour. Coastal towns cried out against a private beach access law Scott signed, yet Nelson rarely pounced. Take SunPass. The tolling system broke down. And so this is actually a good analysis of why he lost the race. The tolling system broke down in early June, and for weeks, Scott had few answers as motorists across the state couldn't access their accounts and were charged late fees. Nelson waited until late July to call for an investigation and barely mentioned it after. He could have done more to capitalize on that, said Yon Townsend, executive director of the Hillsborough County Democratic Party. That's the Tampa area. Bill just wasn't the limelight seeker and was steady and did his job. It's a new day in politics, and we have to learn to play the game better. With a fuzzy public image in the minds of many in Florida's ever-changing electorate, Nelson also committed the mistake of allowing Scott to define him on TV as an over-the-hill politician who stayed too long in Washington and didn't accomplish much. Exactly. Which is true. Freely spending millions, Scott started pounding the airwaves in April, months before Nelson was able to sustain a post-Labor Day TV advertising campaign. Scott poured $64 million of his wealth into the race, and with his political action committee outspent Nelson 3-1. Freely spending millions, Scott started pounding the airwaves in April, months before Nelson. So they just repeated this paragraph. Real nice. Real nice, Miami Herald. He was able to prevail in statewide elections because he works hard at it. He understands public service, and he loves Florida, said Nelson's longtime aide Pete Mitchell. But we were in an environment that's very difficult with so much tribal behavior. Nelson, who at 76 was elected to office in the State House District in Melbourne, near Cape Canaveral in 1972. People drove Ford Mavericks, and All in the Family was cutting-edge television. A Nelson newspaper ad in his hometown Florida Today newspaper late in that campaign ran next to an ad for the New England Oyster House, which offered a flounder dinner for $2.50. Yeah, I guess that sounds pretty tasty. As the years rolled by, Nelson, I actually could go for a fish dinner right now. Nelson kept winning, but somehow never established an especially strong identity with voters or a legacy that made him seem indispensable. Exactly. His legacy is that he kept getting reelected. He went to space as a congressman in 1986. On the eve of the 2018 election, his daughter Nan was still recounting that flight to Democratic organizers in St. Petersburg who politely listened. Bill left no footprints whatsoever, said Republican strategist J.M. Max Stepanovich, who's credited with slapping the tag empty suit on Nelson when he ran for governor in 1990. He filled a seat, he didn't hurt us, and he didn't help us. Still, Nelson was a reliable vote for Democrats. He quietly spearheaded Florida's fight against offshore drilling in 2010. He stuck with Democrats and voted for the Affordable Care Act, even as he faced an election back home. For an October rally in Tampa, former Vice President Joe Biden said that took courage. I've met more senators than anybody living, Biden said. I haven't met anyone in all my years with more character, courage, integrity, and decency than Bill Nelson. But Nelson lacked a compelling message. His formal manner, even wearing his familiar uniform of blue blazer and khakis, cut a dated profile like a candidate from the 1980s. He still uses words like balderdash. For all the across-the-aisle work that he's done, he just ended up without that one signature thing that people could look at and say. Sink paused for several breaths before shifting course. He just went up there to do his job and be a statesman. And in today's environment, that just doesn't work. When Nelson won a Senate seat in 2000, he captured 38 of the state's 67 counties. They included Old Florida, Madison, Deep South Jackson, and Gulf in the coastal panhandle. He won in Imperial Polk County and in a reddening Pasco County. Nelson lost all of those counties in 2018 and wasn't particularly close in any of them. Instead, he won 13 counties, mostly clustered around Florida's urban hubs. In rural Washington County, where Nelson's ancestors first put down roots in the hamlet of Orange Hill in the 1800s, Scott trounced it by a 5-1 margin. As the state grew more, I don't know what that has to do with anything. As the state grew more partisan, so too has Nelson's party. Young progressives who enthusiastically rallied around Andrew Gillum, the Democratic candidate for governor, could not muster anywhere near that level of enthusiasm for Nelson, a lifelong centrist whose ability to work across the aisle with Republicans is viewed as a liability, not an asset in these hyper-partisan times. I think that Nelson actually won more votes. Though he moved with the party on issues like LGBT rights, he angered progressives earlier this year when he voted for Gina Haspel for CIA director. Watching some of his votes, it's hard not to feel like he wasn't representative of what we stand for, said Jessica Vaughn of Tampa, president of the Progressive Caucus of Tampa Bay, who added that Democrats would have been wise to test Nelson in a primary. In his final race, Nelson slightly outperformed Gillum, which I said just a couple seconds ago, something few would have predicted. Most Democrats believe Nelson's low-key campaign was rescued by the energy Gillum brought to the ticket. Even at Nelson's election night party, Gillum T-shirts were more easy to spot. We have to pay attention to who is voting now, said Representative Chevron Jones, a West Park Democrat and one of the party's youngest elected leaders in Tallahassee. Young people are voting, and if they don't know you, they're not voting for you. They will leave it blank. I know people that did that. So, just for the record, they picked Nelson by a 2.4 average in the polls. Okay, those that follow the polls, and I think the polls are bullshit. But some of these polls, as late as October, the first week of November, said that Nelson had a 7-point lead, and he lost. And he lost fair and square. And I think that we have to finally say that these centrist Democrats are going to not win in increasingly red states, which is what Florida might be becoming. Might be. I'm not quite sure yet. So we have a couple other stories. So Ocasio-Cortez is backing a campaign to primary fellow Democrats. The incoming Congresswoman endorses an effort by the group Justice Democrats to make the House Democratic Caucus more liberal and diverse by taking on incumbents. So this story is not a story, okay? Because the fact is that Ocasio-Cortez, who I don't agree with on anything, I think she's an idiot, but she ran with this entire thing in mind. This was her vision, and if she would not do this, it would be basically betraying the trust of the voters that she did get, and the people around the country that did believe in her. Okay, so I will stick up for her in this respect. Okay, Ocasio-Cortez and her group, Justice Democrats, their whole intention is to replace the aging group of politicians like Bill Nelson that have held the Democrats and made them kind of a corporatized fake entity for decades. Now, their ideas, I think, are garbage. Their ideas include Medicare for all and, breaking up the big banks, I think, is the one that I think would be the most rational one. But yes, the $15 minimum wage across the country. They want to. What was the other one? Net neutrality, which I don't care about. They have the other policy with respect to. What do they believe in? Oh, the Green New Deal. Okay, that one I'm not quite sure what it means. So I'll reserve judgment on that. I won't say it's a good or bad idea. But from what I hear, it's mostly a regulation-based agenda towards the economy. So, they're strong on climate change. They're strong on gun control. So they're very pro-gun control. Automatically, I would say I oppose the Justice Democrats. But if you really look closely, who should not be opposing the Justice Democrats? Well, the Democratic Party leadership. If that's what they're pushing for real transparency and commitment to the issues, then people like Pelosi, people like Bill Nelson, who's finished, and people like Chuck Schumer should be embracing people like Ocasio-Cortez. They should be embracing people like Gillum, I guess. They should be totally on board with them, but they're not. And how now publicly, I don't think that they would admit that they're not on board with them because they can't alienate the young people that have voted for the Democrats as a result of people like Ocasio-Cortez. But in reality, because we're seeing stories like this in Politico, we know that Politico is kind of slanted. They are slanted towards the Democrats. It's not really something that I'm going to debate. They've attacked progressives before that have tried to change the party, whether it's Sanders, whether it's Kucinich. They've always been on the side of the Democratic establishment. And I think it's really, it's just expected. And if they think that this is what's going to get the Democrats to win the White House in 2020, I would say they're doing the wrong thing. Okay? It's okay. It's okay for Ocasio-Cortez to call for change in the Democratic Party. The fact of the matter is that politically, it's not a good step. Politically, for her, it's not a good step because she has to now make friends with a lot of the people within the Democratic Party in Congress who she's trying to get replaced. So they're going to be basically saying, well, screw you. You're basically our competition. She's trying to get more people like her into the party on the congressional level. They're going to push back and do whatever they can to knock her out. And it's going to be very strange what happens the next 2 years. So I guess, I am personally, I don't know what to buy into with the Republican Party at the moment in terms of the Republicans in Congress. Rick Scott, I guess congratulations to him. He did win fairly, but I don't really have much hope for him being like a very good senator. We in Ohio, we have a very similar guy, Rob Portman, who is basically a liberal Republican who's more than willing to compromise on gun control and things like that. Gun control and possibly even health care in Portman's case. So no, I think that every voter in the country, okay, listen to this, every voter in the country, whether you're a progressive, whether you're a conservative, whether you're a green person, you're an environmentalist, whether you're a libertarian, you must be probably feeling a little alienated, at least a bit, from both of these political parties, if not even from the third parties that are out there, because there just doesn't seem to be any traction and movement. It just seems to be going nowhere. Not to end on a positive note, so we're going to be doing a live stream tonight, 9 Eastern time. We're going to have basically a bunch of the people that have already been on the show. So I have here Trump blasts little Adam shit on Twitter. Awesome. Fantastic. This is exactly what I've wanted from him. I want him to really go hard and call these people tell them what he really thinks. These ingrates. So that's about it. Please like my video. Share the video. Watch the stream tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And also comment when this uploads. I know this is kind of cutting it close to the stream, but I figured I might as well make this tonight and not have to wait. So yeah, please also contribute to the Patreon if you can, and subscribe to me on Gab, and I'll see you guys later.